Now you're gonna complain. I didn't even quick pitch you, and you're still gonna complain. And I didn't even quick pitch you.
Well, I mean, I get the purpose of the drum roll is like a countdown, but you could still you'd still think you're like, hey,
so
the drum roll is gonna start.
So the drum roll. So you need a warning to the warning now. The drum roll is the warning.
I get that.
And now you're saying you need a warning for the warning.
Well, but what if I wasn't ready?
That's what the drum roll is for.
But the drum roll only lasts 5 seconds. Like, what if I wasn't? What if I had to go to the bathroom? Were you going to drum roll for 3 minutes?
Welcome to the Midday Show. I'm Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. Oh, look, it still says you're Alana. I'll see if I can fix that.
What's wrong?
It still says you're Alana. I'll see if I can fix that. It says I'm Jeff and Mark.
Well, that's funny because I have a story about that.
Thank you guys for coming back to the Midday Show. I walked in today. We were kind of wondering what we should talk about. I was boring. I said, I want to talk about billionaire LeBron because he was announced he's a billionaire. And then I said, what do you got to talk about? And you said, just a couple of things. I want to talk about guns, which was not what I was expecting to do today. But I think here's what I would say. I think there's conversations that need to be had. I think you and I can have them in a manner in which we're not just going to scream at each other. And I think that matters. So we're going to talk about guns today.
I don't think we've ever screamed at each other.
Not like, I think we've gotten aggressive, I don't think I've ever deliberately just screamed at you.
No, there's some times you've been fired up.
Yeah. But none of it's animosity.
I can't believe you're this dumb.
Well, the other part, and the other part of it too, and I always, because I fall into this with my girlfriend a lot, I love to debate. To me, debating is not necessarily fighting. And I think there are people that if you really love to debate, there are people that will look at you and be like, why are you why are you arguing with me?
Well, I agree. And it depends what school of thought you are. Like if I believe something and you believe something differently, a lot of people just want to browbeat you with my information until they think that the heavens are going to open, the angels are going to sing, and you're going to be like, oh my God, now I see the light. If I really feel one way and you feel the other, I want to know why you feel the other way. Sure. So I need to hear what you're saying because I'm curious because I just don't see it that way. So maybe I'm going to be enlightened.
Well, it's funny because I've had people say to me stop arguing. And I always I kind of half jokingly say to them, I feel like I'm digging. I don't feel like I'm arguing. I feel like I'm digging to try to understand, what is it that you see that I don't see? What is it that you understand that I don't understand? What are the connections that you are making that I clearly am not?
Right.
And so this will be good because I don't think you and I don't think we're completely on opposite ends of this debate, but I do think we're on opposite sides of the fence.
A little, but
for some of this stuff.
But anyway, before we get into that, ask me how I'm doing. I'm doing well.
Most important question of every day, Mark. How are you doing?
You are going to love this story. This is going to be one of the best stories I've ever told. I'm in a local establishment last night getting dinner.
Okay.
And just the person behind the counter looks at me, said, hey, how you doing? Person smiles, says, hey, how you doing?
Yeah.
And just like I've done 10,000 times in my life.
Okay.
But there was kind of a smilish. It was more than just obligatory.
Yeah.
So after a couple seconds, the girl looks back at me and says, aren't you on that Midday Show? And I said, yep. And she said how much she watched, blah, blah, blah. And it's a really good job. And for a moment, I am thinking how much of an imprint we have on local society doing this show. And then she says to me, 5 seconds later, are you Mark or are you Jeff? And then I'm like, there's the imprint.
There it is.
You can't even tell us apart.
There it is.
We are not the odd couple. We're not we're not in characters. We're just guys.
Yeah. I think a couple of people that I've talked to about it before, because there are people that watch it once a week. There's people that will catch it when they can. There is this idea of, and I don't even realize you and I do this often, but we do tie stuff back to things that are relatable here. And so, like, even if we're talking about a national story, there's a lot of times where we'll use analogies of places that people know here and people, local celebrities that people know. So I haven't noticed it when you and I talk, but then when I talk to people, they say, like, yeah, it's nice because it just kind of ties into local things that we know, even if the story is a national
So
story.
we're even better than we thought we were.
I think it's by accident. If that is true, I think it's certainly by accident and not by preparation by any means.
Okay, that's the first thing off my little stupid list before we get to
How
the
big
good
is your list?
It's quick.
Okay.
It's long, but it'll be quick. Second thing, the Pirates just swept the Dodgers in LA.
Okay.
Which never happens because Pirates aren't that good.
Sure.
50 games into the season, and the Dodgers are the best team in baseball, arguably. If it's not the Yankees, Mets, Pirates sweep 3 on the road in LA. 50 games into the season, the Pirates are better than the Phillies. Okay. Who would have ever guessed that?
That was an end of the show thing. What else for the beginning of the show?
Okay. Well, I just want to rattle these off while we still have listeners. One of the things.
So just so I understand, you've now taken the things you would do at the end of the show and you have moved them to the front of the show so that your list can be with the most viewers possible. Is that what I'm understanding?
Because these are cute little tidbits, I think, that people will enjoy.
What's number 3?
Like how people are going to be like, they're baseball fans today. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe the Pirates have a better record than the Phillies. But
what's number 3?
Yesterday, when we talked about the whole Cal Ripken thing for a long time, I had one cute little story that I forgot to tell you. And this isn't, I don't even know if this is cute, but this is like real life as to how big it was. I remember we talked about her pregnancy during the season and they induced labor on an off day.
Yeah.
And I remember asking her, what happens if you go into labor, like when he's at the ballpark? And she's like, he will get a phone call then that says you had a healthy baby boy. And I said, you won't call him. And she's like, no, I'm not. He's not missing a game for this childbirth. Okay. So as much as like now in society, like our generations, we had grandfathers that weren't at weddings. Some of them were at war, some of them were at work, whatever. Yeah. Back in the day, it wasn't that outrageous for the husband not to be at a wedding. Now, not the wedding, at a birth.
Right.
Nowadays, it's different, but that was her. She's like, if he's at the ballpark and I go into labor, I'm not calling him. Yeah. He will play and then he will come home. So I just thought that was just a real world thing. All right, Top Gun. And you haven't seen it yet, but I've still. I wonder if this has ever happened to you. These next two things, or did they ever happen to you?
Okay.
I loved it, just like everyone else loved it. I saw it Sunday night. Mm-hmm. A lot of times you see a movie that you love so much, and it brings it like I'm gonna go see that one again. I'm kind of afraid to go see it again because it was so perfect the way it is.
Okay.
I don't want to mess it up. Have you ever had that?
I think there's movies that there's either there's a twist or a catch, or there is a feeling that the first time you watch it is almost impossible to duplicate the second time. So I totally understand. Would Top Gun be one of those movies for me? Probably not. For you, the whole nostalgia, I get why you would feel that way.
And I've seen lots, and I'm sure everyone has done this. They've seen a movie that at the end of it, they're like, that's a good movie.
Yeah.
But in some reason it was disturbing and they're not really ever anxious to see it again.
Okay.
But this is kind of the opposite. I enjoyed it so much and I was so happy.
Sometimes this isn't a good example. Do you remember Shutter Island with Scorsese movie with Leonardo?
It was Leo.
So after you see it the first time, you know the twist.
Right.
There's no more twist. So when I went to see it the second time, I was kind of not looking forward to it. But I had a cousin who had never seen it before. And so anyway, we put it on and we start watching it. And as I'm watching it the second time, I'm like, oh, this is actually cooler because now I'm noticing all the things I didn't the first time because I know to look for them. So there are times where that fear actually stops you from seeing it a second time. And you're like, this was even better than the first time. So I don't know, something to consider.
Yes, that is true. I've had that happen to me with in the theater world because my daughter's been in shows. Like she was in The Music Man. She played the little girl, and I should know the girl's name, but it's like Anastasia, but it's not. Someone can tell me what it is. Yeah. But I'd never seen The Music Man, and the first time I went to see it, I didn't really like it.
Yeah.
But because my daughter was in it and had a pretty big part, I went back again. And I really liked it more the second time because I already knew the storyline. So now I could hear the music better. I could focus on. So yes, I can understand the something that you didn't think you would like the second time you would. This is kind of the other end of the spectrum. All right, so last one. My last thought. This is my college age daughter is taking a college class right now. Like she's off for the summer, but she's taking an online class, and it's hard. It's like organic chemistry or something like that.
Okay.
So she comes out of her room the other night. She's doing the happy dance, and she's like, "I just got an 82 on my first exam." And my first thought is 82 is not bad. It's not like she's a nerdy kid. Like 82 is not happy. She's like, the class average was 57.4. And then it all clicked in. Did you have college classes like that were just like, it doesn't really matter what I get. It matters what the curve is because it's so hard?
Yeah. So I had chemistry. My first 2 years in school, I tried to do mechanical engineering technology. The computer stuff I was great at. The things applied to it, the chemistry and the physics, I really struggled with. So the whole thing was literally based on the curve. Like could you do better than the curve? And that's what really mattered. So yes, I've been in that situation where like you could get like a 59.
And it's not that bad.
And it's really not that bad of a grade, depending on the rest of the class.
That's just the different world of some of those college classes. But that was funny. She was thrilled, and I was like, "Ew." I usually do better than that. Well, it was a 57.4 was the average. Yeah. So anyway, I think everyone that's been to college has had that class somewhere.
Oh, I would agree with that.
Where it's just so hard that the curve,
and especially larger classes, because you're just trying to they're just weeding you out essentially. Right. I had one chemistry class. I think it had 200 kids in it, and I mean, all they're doing is weeding you out. Yeah. They're just, you look across the room and half of you aren't making it.
Yeah. All right. Let's do LeBron, because this is, I think your take is absolutely right on with LeBron.
Oh, you want to do the LeBron?
Let's do LeBron first, don't you think?
I don't. So here's the basis of the story. You've got me all messed
up.
Oh,
sorry. We can go out. I just thought
You're doing good. Billionaire LeBron. Forbes came out, I believe it was this morning, announcing that LeBron James is the first active athlete to be a billionaire. So, for example, Michael Jordan is a billionaire now. Kobe, I believe, was a billionaire before he passed away, but they were both retired. Right. LeBron is still an active player in the NBA. He's officially a billionaire. Forbes. All of that stuff is neat. I think he does a lot of really good stuff with his money. The things he does for Akron, the things he does for his communities across America, they're all great. All I'm doing right now is just being like basketball analyzer, annoying, nitpicky guy. I don't think it's shocking that on the first day of the NBA Finals, and really the first year that LeBron James was not a part of any of this, his team
didn't make the playoffs.
They didn't make the play in. I mean, even in previous year, they had made the play in and they became the 8th seed, and they did not make the play. They were not one of the best 10 teams in their conference. It is not a coincidence that this article is being released on the first day of the NBA Finals.
And I think you said it perfectly, where you're like, I'm equally as annoyed as I am impressed with their ability to. So just to reiterate, his team didn't even make. He's the greatest player of this generation, no doubt about it. He's in the argument for the greatest player of all time, even though neither of us would say he's the greatest player because that's Jordan. He's in that argument. He's in the top 2, 3, 4, whatever it is.
Sure.
But his team didn't even make the playoffs. But the first day of the NBA Finals, he is front and center. Yes. And they're talking more about him than they are about Steph Curry.
Correct. It's so meticulously crafted and planned. It's so impressive what his team. They just understand how to make sure that he is at the front of kind of everything.
It's brilliant.
It's so annoying and it's so impressive, and it's really just goes to show that some people are just bigger than, I don't want to say life, but some people are just bigger than everybody else.
See,
and he is an example of that.
What's weird,
there was no reason to talk about LeBron James today, and LeBron James and his team found a way to make sure that everybody talked about LeBron James.
See, and that annoys you. I think it's great.
I'm annoyed because I'm jealous. I am like unbelievably impressed by the marketing and the team and just how they're able to do it. I am annoyed though because there's this idea, there's a narrative around LeBron James that like he has made sure He's not going to let anybody else decide what you think about LeBron James. He's going to make sure that you know, I am X, I am Y, I am Z. And you're not going to decide that for yourself. And their marketing behind that and their plan behind that is ingenious.
Yeah,
it's so impressively well done.
I'm a LeBron fan because I don't I think that he took abuse. I think the Jordan defenders, which I think Jordan's greatest player of all time, but I think they kind of felt like then they had to say LeBron's not that good. And LeBron's really good.
He's ridiculously good.
So like, you know, I think he's gotten beaten up more than he deserves, because I think, as you said, he is a good guy. Like,
yes.
for a lot, like he does a lot of good things,
yes.
but even beyond that, when you talk to people, like, he's a good guy.
Yes.
He seems like, I mean, I don't know him, but yeah, it's there. I think the thing that you said, his team gets it.
Yes.
And they get it better than everybody else.
Yep.
And like, kudos to them.
They do an incredible, this will be the last thing I say about it. They do an incredibly good job of, like, here's LeBron, here's LeBron, here's LeBron. And this moment where you thought you weren't going to think about LeBron, here's LeBron. But in the meantime, all the things that you might say are a problem, they're not really problems. Like, he didn't make the playoffs this year. Well, Russell Westbrook was an idiot. Like, they weren't very good this year. Well, Frank Vogel just wasn't the right coach for the team. Like, well, you know, he wasn't able to win all those championships. Well, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love and the Miami Heat got old, and their team does an unbelievable job of just making sure that you are talking about him in the best possible way. And to say anything, you can't, for me to say something bad about him is awkward, because he's such a good guy and he is one of the greatest players ever. And it's like, but here's the deal. Like, he couldn't stay healthy this year.
Well, he's 38 years old.
See, you're proving my point for me. He allowed them to trade for Russell Westbrook, right? He basically threw Frank Vogel under the bus after he just helped them win a championship less than 2 years ago. Like, there's all these aspects where I think it's very fair to be like, yeah, like, LeBron didn't have a great year, but yet you wake up in a year where he didn't make the playoffs, everyone's talking about what a great businessman he is and how he's the first active billionaire. And they have all the pieces in place, and they do an incredible job moving them around so that there's never a moment where you can technically, like, criticize LeBron James. And it's
I disagree with that.
It's kudos. I mean, I just tried to, and you had an answer for every single one of you weren't even trying.
No, but here's what I'm going to say. Like, he did, and this is not, he led the league in scoring, right?
I don't think he did this year.
He was
for a while, he was up there.
Okay, but he was close. It's not like he had a bad year.
No, he had a good year.
I think one of the things with LeBron was a quote. Did I ever tell you this one about what Bono, the lead singer of U2, said about Prince? He put out something, and because Prince had obviously gotten so big in the music world, and he owned his own record, studio and all this stuff, and he that he kind of he didn't have to clear anything with anyone anymore. Okay. And LeBron has gotten that big in the NBA that, like, LeBron, I don't know if to say LeBron runs the Lakers, but he does. And that Bono said about Prince, he's a genius in need of an editor.
Okay.
And so he was basically saying there's still some point, because as brilliant as Prince is, he doesn't have all the answers. And there's still some point that he has to pass it off to someone else. And someone else has to say, this is what I think, because it would help. And I think in the construction of the lineups of these teams, it would not hurt LeBron to have someone who had more say than he does. And I don't think anyone in LA has more say than he does.
I don't think anywhere he's ever gone, he was not the person actually making the decisions.
Yes.
Now I understand, like, other people had to dot the I's, and I understand they certainly had to come up with the plan, but none of this stuff went through without his kind of, I mean, this is like, you thinking he led the league in scoring this year is kind of an example of what I'm saying.
He was leading the league in scoring.
But this is the point that I'm making. When he was leading the lead in scoring, it was all you heard about. 38 years old, he's leading. And now here's the funny thing, though. The moment he's no longer leading the league in scoring, like, they don't tell you who the new leading scorer is. They don't tell you. And so this is all, I'm just saying, Their messaging and their branding is any company who is not studying how LeBron James and his team handles his business and his brand, they are missing out. It's one of the best of all time.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Because the Jordan, LeBron, even though Kobe was more like Jordan as a player, LeBron is bigger and they're just different types of basketball players. But the LeBron Kobe or the LeBron Jordan conversation always shows up. Do you think now, looking back, LeBron has any regrets over doing Space Jam?
No, I don't think he cares. I think it was a financial decision. He made the movie. It was successful. I don't think he even cares about whether or not people compare it to the original or compare it to Michael Jordan. I don't think he cares.
And he might not.
I don't think he does.
And I think there'd be an aspect of, like, I really want to take this challenge on and I'm going to do it. But, like, he got the Golden Raspberry for Worst Actor. He got, like, even people who aren't basketball people, like the original Space Jam was a beloved movie, like universally beloved. And it's one of the other things, like LeBron did like the Jordan's movie. Space Jam was Jordan's movie, and LeBron was going to do it. He was going to modernize it. And I don't think I don't know what the box office said, but there's no place else in society or in Critics Corner or in anywhere else where it did as well as the original. And I wonder if in his aspect, now that he looks back, that he's like, yeah, maybe I should have left that one alone.
From that standpoint, you could be correct. I don't know though, because I would be curious how many people have seen both. I found out one of the neat things about him doing the new one is I found out how many kids below the age of 18 have ever seen the original Space Jam. It's not a lot.
Oh, I think they all did.
No.
All my kids have seen Space Jam.
Well, yeah, because you're you and they're your kids.
But I got two girls. I got one girl hates sports.
I understand that, but you're you and they're your kids. I was shocked at how many sports-loving kids had never seen the original Space Jam.
Okay.
I was really shocked by it.
I would be shocked too then.
So I don't know how many people under the age of 18 are even comparing them. To them, there is no other Space Jam. LeBron James' Space Jam is Space Jam. And, so I also read a piece that basically said this Space Jam was not for Michael Jordan fans. It wasn't for 35 to 55-year-olds. This Space Jam was for your 15-year-old who wanted to go see LeBron James in a computer world. And I thought that was very true.
No, I get that. Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
And maybe the critics were, I don't know. I just like the golden, and listen, Halle Berry got a golden raspberry for Catwoman. And there have been very many famous people. As we know, Bruce Willis, they made his own category for it. And
right.
So yeah, I mean, he's in some elite company with that, but still, I wondered what his take would be now if
it were
he gave one.
I think he'd still do it. That's a 100% guess. I think he'd do it.
I think there are lots of people, artists, because this is an artist, not that LeBron is an artist, but this was an artistic endeavor, that do things that fail or don't get the public reaction that they'd hoped for, and are still proud they did it because they wanted to take on the challenge and they would do it again, and they just felt like it was something they needed to try. So anyway.
All right.
What's red flagging?
It has to do with guns.
Oh, all right. Well, this is my simple take on the whole the gun situation now, because there was another shooting yesterday in I don't even remember where it was. And that's part of it. We've become so numb to it.
There was one in Tulsa. Is that the one you're referring to?
Yes, it was in Tulsa. We've become so numb to it because now there seems like there's one a day.
Right.
And so from one aspect is, I don't want to say, since it's not even, I don't want to say it's not newsworthy. Newsworthy is not the right, but it's so commonplace now that it doesn't, you're not texting people, hey, did you hear about the shooting? Did you hear about this? Did you hear about this? Because there's one every day. So It's not even a water cooler conversation point anymore. On the flip side of it, we are now getting people from the right who are coming out and saying, listen, I support the Second Amendment, but something needs to be done.
Yeah.
And is this a point in time where we've just become so numb to it that nobody cares anymore, that they're just like, well, this is what it is, and it stops being front page news? Or because it happens every day, are we now to the point that enough people on the right are saying, listen, yes, Second Amendment, no AR-15, like we have to figure something out?
Well, I think the hardest part for people to wrap their head around is this conversation is not what people want it to be about. Most people, whether you're on the left or you're on the right, you want this conversation to be about the Second Amendment, and you want this conversation to be like, should you be able to own an AR-15 or not? Should you have to have a waiting period or not? Should you red flag people? All these different conversations that are debates, right? But the real, like, the question that you pose to me, this starts with funding politicians, because it doesn't matter if the people in the House and the Senate are sick of it or not. The question is, how big was their check from the NRA? And that's on both sides of the aisle. Like, that's a left and a right issue. And until politicians will not accept money from the NRA, none of this debate matters. It doesn't. Like, we can come up with hashtags on Instagram and we can have all these basic discussions, but as long as the NRA and other companies are lining the politicians' pockets, they're never going to vote reasonably. They're never going to have an actual discussion or say a statement that is actually how they internally feel about this. Because I would imagine, red or blue, most people know. Like, when Ted Cruz walks up in front of the NRA and talks, I don't know if you got to see it or not, but when Ted Cruz walks up in front, I find it hard to believe he truly believes what he's saying. Like, you can just tell, like, when he's speaking, like, this is not, he is trying to find ways to appease the person who wrote him the check. And you can just tell by the way he talks.
That's very well said.
And so I think, like, again, I think it's worthwhile to I'm not telling people to not debate about guns. Go for it. I'm just simply saying, though, like, you can't debate about guns, but be ignorant to the fact that these people aren't telling you what they actually feel. These people are telling you what they have been paid to do by these corporations like the NRA. Now, here's where it gets, like, super tricky. People go, okay, I don't want the NRA to be able to pay politicians anymore, right? Okay, well, like, what about other companies? Like, What about a company you support? What about a company you agree with? Because if you're not going to allow the NRA to get out their checkbooks, now you have to basically cut off all the other corporations from opening up their checkbooks. Some people would be okay with that. Like, some people would be thrilled to have all of that money out of the politics. Some people don't, because now it's taking away from their opportunity to have the things that they want. So until people are willing to reasonably recognize that that's the deep-rooted issue here, I think anyone can look at each other and say, like what's been happening is awful. I think it's very hard for people to be able to dig deeper beneath that and understand that, like, what's actually happening. And what's happening is that these politicians are paid off, and they're never going to, like, people are like, oh, these, like, the Republican senators, they won't vote or pass this through. Yes, because they're paid through the NRA. Just like there's 1,000 other bills that will just sit and never get passed through because they're paid off by somebody else.
That's true. Very well said. I have no follow-up to that. Well, term limits. That's my only follow-up.
What's that?
Term limits.
Term limits. The term limits would help. I think that's part of it. I don't know how you ever get all the money out of politics again. I think it's so far gone. I'm not really sure what the solution to that. I mean, I guess the same way term limits, you could have donation limits, but then now you get into the back door of politics, and people, like, they're still going to get their money one way or the other. So term limits certainly helps, but it's tough. But until that point, like, people, you can make these bills and you can do all this stuff and you can yell and scream, but that's the root of it. Like, if I were on the left, in which I'm not, if I were on the left and I wanted some of these bills to pass through, you really have to start at the root of, like, how do you convince right-sided politicians to not take money from the NRA? And it's just, that's a very hard predicament. I don't know how you stop them. There, and by the way, there's a lot of blue senators that have accepted money from the NRA. Like this is not
sure.
like this is not just. I mean, the right is certainly the ones blocking it right now, but this is not just a right-sided issue. It's a both sides of the aisle issue.
Absolutely.
Accepting money from these corporations and stuff like that. There's a lot of things though. I think so much has been focused on AR-15s right now, and why do you need them, and should they be in society? And I think they're all reasonable questions. I'm just not as fascinated by that conversation as some of like the more deep-rooted stuff. One of them that I brought up here, like the red flagging, one of the most interesting ideas that I have heard, and this was on the All In podcast. So these are basically like some of the best investors that we've had over like the last decade or so. And they do this podcast and they talk about different human issues. One of them that I had never thought about, the guy brought up the example of 9/11. And the two examples that he gave, he says in 9/11, he goes, it took us a month to basically flip that industry on its head. We created a registry, like the Homeland Security Department. Like we did all these things to basically manipulate so that a plane would never fly into a building again, right? That was kind of the goal of it. And we changed all of it like that, like overnight. And so my question is like, people want to get rid of AR-15s, and I understand that. But when a plane flew into a building, we couldn't get rid of the planes. So it became, okay, what's the next step? Like if we can't if we can't stop flying, like we can't, like people have to get on planes and they have to travel and they have to get somewhere. So what's the next step? So like we created a registry and like we changed the way the processes to get onto a plane and all that. And so that's why I've said like, I totally for amending the Second Amendment and adjusting it and making it work for today's society. But I also think like we have to look further than that. I think there's a real question of like, why aren't we red flagging some of these people? Why isn't there a registry? We have one of the biggest systems in the world for youth. It's the public school system. And all of these public schools have guidance counselors. All of these public schools have records of these kids. We know which kids have been bullied. We know which ones have mental health issues. We know which ones are seeking help. We know all of this stuff before these kids are turning 16, 17, 18 years old. I don't think it's insane to have a real conversation about red flagging some of these people as they're coming out of the public school system. And it doesn't mean they couldn't ever buy a gun, but I think it's very worthwhile to talk about this idea of like, if I'm 18 and in order for me to go buy a gun, like, there is a nationwide registry that shows my record of my guidance counseling and like what I went through at school. And if I'm red flagged, then like I have to see a counselor or I have to go on a waiting period. I have to do something to prove that I am like mature enough to do this because I have been red flagged by the public school system. Is it a perfect system? Absolutely not. Is it better than what we probably have right now? Absolutely. And so I think when you look at other issues in society, like what happened during 9/11 and how we were able to adjust to it and change some things, is it perfect? Does everybody agree with everything we're doing at an airport? No. Is it a pain in the ass? Absolutely. But like, you know what doesn't happen as often? Like planes don't fly into buildings. So all I'm saying is like, yes, I understand that people deep-seated on the left want AR-15s gone. And I get that. But we have to like, you have to start looking at the solutions beneath it that are in, and some of it is like, we have to figure out a way so that money isn't controlling all these senators. You have to figure out a way where we're red flagging some of these people that are susceptible to this stuff. We're not doing any of that stuff. We just sit here and debate AR-15s. And it's not going to solve what people want it to solve.
No,
it has to be a deeper rooted.
It's very good. All you just said was very well said. One of the arguments that you still see online is the best way for stopping bad guys with guns is good guys with guns. Mm-hmm. What has really, really hurt that is this aspect in Texas where the cops waited outside for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And now the whole I've seen placards and memes and things. There's like, you want to arm teachers when the police who have been trained and paid and this is their job, still wouldn't do it. And you think now teachers are going to be the ones when they're not Like you can't train. Teachers would never be trained nearly as well as police.
Well, teachers don't get paid enough to essentially take on an entire second duty.
The response of the police in Texas is going to have a ripple effect to this for a while.
I think I agree with you. I think it has a ripple effect on how the way people look at it or their opinion on it. I'm curious if that ripple can actually carry towards legislation. I personally do.
I doubt it. I agree with that.
My fear for the ripple is that think about, I mean, the size of that ripple and I know what just happened was devastating. Like sometimes when I talk about this stuff, I realize I'm talking about it in a very like non-sympathetic way. I realize that young children lost their life, and I understand that. But like from a logical, broader view standpoint, like if we can step away from the sentiment of it and just like there is the ripple effect that has to happen to stop hundreds of millions of dollars from the NRA from mattering. I mean, that ripple has to be massive.
No,
and this is like probably the worst part about it. I don't even think I don't even think the ripple is close. Like there's people that are like, when is enough? And like, and people are like, oh, I think it's here. And like, I just look at that number and I'm just like, I don't even think we're close. I know that's Debbie Downer and I don't. I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think it's.
I don't think you're wrong.
I mean, this was the other part because I was looking up this morning. There is mass shooting. To you, what is the definition of a mass shooting?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I don't. Does it become? Is it 3 or more? Is it 4 or more? It has to. I'd say it's right in there. Maybe 4.
Okay. So the database that's used by the federal government, a mass shooting, here are some of the ones that were most recently listed, right? Because there's been a lot recently. Tulsa, Oklahoma, 4 killed, 0 injured. Waco, Texas on May 31st, 4 injured, 0 killed. Charleston, South Carolina, May 30th, there were 10 injured, 0 killed. Benton Harbor, Michigan, May 30th, 6 injured, 1 killed. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, May 30th, 2 injured, 2 killed. So we're just talking in this week, right? That's what I just read there. Out of those mass shootings, 7, 8, 9 people were killed in a total of what the federal government considers 6 mass shootings.
Right.
The definition of mass shooting almost damages the point because I think what happened in Texas is what most people think is a mass shooting. But what's ironic is if that, by the definition the federal government's using, it happens every night in Detroit. It happens every night in Philadelphia.
No, Chicago, not by the same person.
No, what do you mean by that?
Not by one shooter.
Well, but understand what I'm saying. Like, for example, in Philadelphia, a mass shooting had 2 killed and 2 injured. In Waco, Texas, a mass shooting had 4 injured, 0 killed.
Right.
Okay. That happens by one shooter in Detroit every night. That happens by one shooter in Chicago.
I don't think so.
You don't think there's that many shootings in Chicago and Detroit? And
I think there are, but I don't think one person shoots 4 people.
Really? You don't think that that's happening on a weekly basis in some of the cities in America?
No, not
really.
Yeah, I don't think there's a guy that walks into a room. I think if a guy walks into a room
like robberies and different things, you don't think that's you don't think that's happening nightly across America on a nightly basis.
Why wouldn't it be categorized?
So this is the point that I'm making to you is I think people struggle to what is the definition of a mass shooting. I don't think most people know. I don't know what the definition of a mass shooting is. What's the difference between someone walking in for a robbery?
I'm guessing just by that, it was 4 or more people got shot by the same person, by one gunman.
So that would be the definition of a mass shooting. It has to be 4 or more.
That would be my guess, because all of those had 4.
Interesting. So it's a number based. It's not about intent. It's not about purpose. It's about the number of people. I mean, mass is a numerical word.
Yeah.
So that would.
Because I think if you walked into a room and just fired shots and didn't hit anyone, it wouldn't be a mass shooting.
That's interesting, though, because if the intent's there, then what would be the
bad?
I mean,
it's a Hollywood action movie.
But you get what I'm saying. like if the intent's there, whether or not you hit somebody,
no, I get
shouldn't determine whether or not it's a mass shooting.
Yeah, I mean, it's just there. It needs to be statistically. It needs to be able to be categorized. So there has to be a number.
So you think they picked 4? Interesting.
It seems like 4.
So this is kind of where I'm going with this. I think that there's a big issue in society where when it's children, it's sad, and I get that. It's incredibly sad what happened in Texas. What happened in Columbine when this whole thing kind of kicked off. But like this stuff is happening every day. It's happening every day. The difference is just like, was it in a school or was it not in a school, right? Like, was it in a shopping market or wasn't in a shopping market? Like, I think in inner cities across America, like shootings like this are happening all the time.
Well,
and there's never like the same outrage. It doesn't make the news. It's not. And again, like, I'm not sitting here implying that means people should have AR-15s. What I'm implying though is like, in order for some of this to be taken seriously, it's got to be taken seriously across all assets of life.
Well,
like
I think there's
a society.
There's a belief, because when it is when some 7-year-old gets hit by a stray bullet as an innocent bystander from whatever, that does make the news.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's this belief that a lot of the inner city gang violence is like bad guy shooting bad guy, and that's just the drug crime world that they live in.
Mm-hmm.
But the world sees it differently when there's people in a shopping market that they just get open fire on, or people like I get what you're saying, that there's, but I think when they're talking about the murders in Chicago, I think society doesn't see that as an innocent person.
And so what I'm saying though is like, I think part of like growing this conversation and making the conversation have like depth behind it, I think people need to really ask themselves, why does this only bother them when it crosses into their part of society? Because there's a lot of shootings done where like it doesn't cross your mind, or it's not a part of your society, and you just move on with your day and you have no concern with it. Like you said, bad guys shooting at bad guys.
And I totally agree with it. One of the things that I've always said that I've always waited, if you get somewhere where a white cop shoots and kills a black guy, Al Sharpton's there.
Mm-hmm.
All the times when a black guy shoots and kills a black guy, why isn't Al Sharpton there?
Sure.
And I agree with you 100%. You know, the life lost is the life lost. And why do we mourn it stronger for some than others is a very fair question. And
I find it hard. Like, I guess this is what I would say. There's a lot of people that have been posting the past week, and I'm not trying to downplay people that have like taken up this topic or this issue. But what I would say is like, there's so much of this stuff going on. Like, to really support this stuff, I feel like you've got to dive into it, and you've got to know some of the stuff, and you have to recognize that like the 19 kids, what happened in Texas is not necessarily like a bubble incident. Like, something happened the day before and something happened the day before that. But I think people are so ingrained in like the mass tragedy, like when something when it crosses, the majority of society can relate to sending their kid to school and just having this sense that I will see my kid at the end of the day. And so what I'm saying though is like, that can't be the reason for your support, because now it's crossed over into your societal line. Like, if you're going to support this, you can't have this false sense that what happens in an inner city or what happens somewhere else is okay the other 364 days of the year.
No, I get it, but people only care about things that affect them. That's why, probably almost without exception, when you see these people who are a driving force in some medical fundraiser with research for this or research for that, it is a disease or a cause that affected them personally.
Yeah. And
that's why that's just the way people are. People only care about things that affect them.
And I guess where, like, I'll end it with this is, I think that some people that support guns, I think that they're the people that are very, very pro Second Amendment, because I think there's people that are pro Second Amendment, and then I think there's people that are like, do not touch the Second Amendment.
Right.
And I think those are two very different people. I think that a lot of like pro Second Amendment people look at it and say and feel like people are cherry picking. Like they feel like they're getting to cherry pick when they are concerned or when they get to raise their voice. And then yet when you look out, everything else that's going on in the world is okay. Like it's all right that there's a shooting every day in Chicago. Like it's okay that these other things are happening. But the moment now you can relate to it, like you're going to show your Instagram.
No, I get that.
And now like the Second Amendment must come down.
Well, and I said too, we had this conversation. We were trying to talk Brett into running for office yesterday.
Wait, is that a real story?
Well, Carrie and I were having a discussion out in that.
Okay.
And he's like, you should run for office. No, you should run for office. And Brett walked in and I was like, Brett will run for office. And he just laughed. Okay. We have to be to the point too. I say we have to be. I take that back because we seem like we're nowhere close. But don't we get enough reasonable, middle of the road, common sense people who say, I'm on the left, but I support the Second Amendment. I'm on the right, but I support Roe v. Wade. Like there are so many of these people out there, but none of them are running for office because the base is so loud, and the parts of each base is so fanatical, is so loud that I don't know if anyone really feels like they can run on the Republican ticket and say, no, I'm in favor of Roe versus Wade. I don't think there's anyone that can run on the Democratic ticket and say, I support the Second Amendment. But in society, when you walk down the street, these people are everywhere. And that doesn't make sense to me.
I think sometimes people start that way or they get there. And then the money is so big and the voices are so large that they like you sink or swim.
And you might be right.
And if you want to swim, you're going to have to play ball. And it doesn't matter how righteous you are. It doesn't matter what your mindset was when you came into this. I think you just get swallowed up by the machine. I think there's very few people.
You're probably right.
I think there's very few people who don't just get taken away within the current of our political system. And again, like that's why I said, I don't even in this heyday of Trump and even like people just couldn't stand Obama. And just when I go down through, I just, when I go back and I look and I'm just like, none of them were that bad. Like nobody was a monster. Like nobody was like, I think they're just in the system and they're all trying to play the system. And like I really do believe that right now. I think the machine has grown to a point where it's just hard. And I would end this with the gun conversation is like, I think if you're going to have the debate about AR-15s, please have the debate about paying politics. I think the idea that like you're going to sit and argue about an AR-15, but you're not going to talk about politicians being paid off. You're not going to talk about red flagging. You're not going to talk about mental health. You're not going to talk about all of those things. Once you're done with your AR-15 conversation, please have those conversations. That is the only. I get it. Now, I'm not trying to be preachy or righteous or anything like that.
Well, that is you. When I think of you, yeah. I think of preachy and righteous.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Every day.
Anything else before we go?
No, you with that shirt, you look like you're ready to go tee it up. I wore my picture. I don't have a pirate shirt, so I wore this since they just swept the Dodgers. This was as close as I have to a pirate shirt. But you look like you're ready to go play 18.
Never happened. That's not true. I do golf like once or twice a year. I always said this about golf. I'm always in a better mood when I show up than when I walk off of it. And for that reason, to spend 3 hours making myself feel worse, why do it? That's kind of my thing. No, don't get me wrong. I've gone with buddies and like
the camaraderie's great.
Yeah.
No, I do know what like there are times that you drag yourself up the 18th hole and you're saying I'm never coming to do this again, and then you hit a good shot on the 18th hole and you're ready to go right back at it.
This is my other issue too. I always end up golfing later in the year. I feel like prime golf was like just now. Like it's 75, it's breezy. Like I end up going in like August and it's 96 in the dead heat of summer.
I love that. It can't be too hot for me, really.
See, I think I would enjoy it much more. I either need to start sooner and end later instead of always going in like the meat of the season.
I have to play golf in long sleeves, whether it's a jacket or whether it's
you
whatever,
don't like it?
I don't like that.
Really?
I like really in central Pennsylvania, I'm sure in Florida and places, Texas, where it's 110 or whatever, it'd be too hot. It would be rare that I would be like, I'd like to play golf today, but it's too hot. 85, 90, bring it.
Dude, I am not an outdoorsman. You make me look like Paul Bunyan. Like it is unbelievable how like finicky and like just like you want nothing. Again, I'm like, my girlfriend makes fun of me. I'm like Mr. Comfort. I don't want to be uncomfortable.
You and your blankie.
I don't want to be uncomfortable. You make me like, you are when it comes to the elements of the outside, you are like.
No, don't get me wrong. I play golf in a jacket, like if I'm in a whatever. But that, like, my ideal golf day is like 85 degrees.
Okay.
It's not room temperature.
No,
it's not.
I know what you mean.
It is hot.
Yeah.
So,
anything else we should look forward to?
By
the way, we should mention
the Rangers won last.
We
week.
should mention Jamie Flick did volunteer to come on, but we had a.
Oh yeah, Jamie was coming yesterday, but we had the conflict, and then he's coming again. We kind of talked about it because he's got, this is the graduation time, and there's just he's got a senior.
Yeah.
So it's not only with his new gig, but his real life. But I have a daughter who's a senior, and you just get into there's baccalaureate night, there's awards night, there's all kinds of stupid stuff. So, yeah, we're figuring it out. But Jamie's coming on.
Yeah, I just wanted to let people know, like he is.
Yeah, he didn't stiff us yet.
Yeah,
maybe his people are being like, you really want to reconsider this.
Well, after they watch today's show.
But if they watch the Top Gun show, he'll be right in.
That's true.
Actually, we should probably make him watch Top Gun before he shows up, because I don't want to.
That's what it is.
I have to talk to you every day, and you haven't seen it yet.
That's been my running joke lately with Eric, because if we don't have a guest on, we've been kind of hitting like the really, I don't want to call them hot button, but we have been certainly talking about things that people consider controversial as of lately.
Yeah.
And so I joke every time we're about to have a guest on, I joke like, hopefully they did not watch the show the day before. Oh, speaking of controversial, Leah Thomas, I don't know, she finally made a statement. Did you?
The swimmer chick?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
I saw somebody else just made a post. Or I say post. I read it as a post, but it was from someone who was a science person, somebody academia, who talked about how clearly there's an advantage.
Sure.
And I don't remember who said it, but they weren't even trying to be like alarming or.
Yeah.
But they're like, anyone that would come out and say there's not an advantage is just lying.
Well, she can't, because it's Pride Month, and I think that was part of the reason.
June is Pride Month, so
Correct.
Pride Month just started. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that was part of the reason that the piece was released when it was released, because I think it was yesterday was the day it was.
It didn't happen to do with the NBA Finals?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think this one actually had to do with Pride Month. And one of the things that she mentioned is her next goal is the Olympics. And that will be fascinating. Without looking, I would assume she's one of, assuming that, she is allowed to compete, she has to be one of our fastest swimmers, is she not?
Well, I think she just said all these conference. Now, I know it was Ivy League. It wasn't, which isn't always the greatest of the academic world, but in the athletic world, but in some of these
she won a national title.
Was it the national title, or was it just a conference title?
I think she won a national title. It's been a month or two.
I mean, she's got to be in contention. So was it a story? Did she release a statement, or was it an interview?
It was like a story, like an interview.
Did people get to ask her questions?
Yeah, there were questions within it.
Does she not think she has an advantage?
I still go back to this. I think what she is going through, you have to have blinders up. And I think her journey is very selfish. Some of it in a positive way, some of it in a negative way. This whole journey is finding yourself, right? So internally it's a selfish journey. I'm trying to figure out who I am.
Correct.
On the flip side of that, though, you have your blinders on. And one of the statements that she did make in the interview, and we touched on this a little bit when we talked about it, she said, she goes, this is about me and finding myself and being happy. And nothing else is more important than that. And so I go back to my point of like, I wonder if years removed, she'll look back and realize how people from the outside who are competing could find that incredibly selfish. I'm more fascinated not by what is happening now. I want the like 10,
The
20
retrospective.
year, I want the sit down with Leah Thomas in 2040. And I want her to reflect back on it. And I'm curious what she thinks of what happened, what took place.
No, I get it. But
because I think in her mind right now, I think to her, she is still very much a hero. I don't, that interview and from what I read, I don't get the feeling that she views it as if she is doing something unfair, unjust. I don't think she thinks she's doing anything that isn't worth it for her.
No. Okay, and I get that. My question isn't about that. My question is, don't you just think you have an advantage? And because the whole aspect where she's like, I'm just doing what makes me happy. The world does that's not how the world works. If your neighbor, if you're a little kid and your neighbor just got a new bike and you don't have a bike, you just can't go steal your neighbor's bike because it makes you happy. That's not fair. And this aspect of like, well, I like to swim and I like to win and I like to compete in swimming, but you have an undeniable advantage, and it's not fair to the other swimmers. So just because it makes you happy,
totally. I think
that's the question I'd be dying to ask.
Yeah, your perspective from like a competition perspective, because you're not really like what you just said rings true, but you're not looking at it from like her perspective necessarily. And so what I'm saying is like from her perspective, I don't know from the interview she just gave. I don't know if she's even thinking about the things that you and I are thinking.
But she has to.
I don't think she is. And if she is, then she is incredibly well coached up to not say the wrong things. Because everything about this interview, again, is like, this is my journey and my happiness, and I'm doing it for me.
And listen, if she was in a chess tournament, she can compete as a woman. If it was an art contest, she can compete as a woman. Like, but in the physical, bigger, stronger, faster, it's just not fair. And and we've talked about this before. This is one of the few discussions where right and left is pretty much on the same side.
Yeah. But see, I think don't you feel like that's, solved isn't the right word. Don't you feel like there's a consensus on that? Like, I feel like there's like a 70-80% consensus that it's unfair.
Oh, I think it might even be more than that.
Okay. So to me, like that part of it's not settled, but like
if the court of public opinion has ruled.
Yes.
Okay.
That's why to me, the topic is no longer swimming. The topic is no longer like transgender. To me, the topic is her.
No, I get what you're saying. That is interesting.
Her psyche and her psychology, and the fact that like after all of that, for her to say my next goal is the Olympics. I mean, you have to be so ingrained in yourself and in what you are doing to just be willing to come out and say after all that, like, next stop Olympics. Like,
and I agree with when you talked about from the heroic aspect. I'm sure that there are transgender people, and not just transgender people, not just LGBTQ people, but the support that she has, even if it's say 85% of society thinks it's wrong and unfair, I would bet the other 15% are very vocal, and she's got enough loud vocal support and pats on the back that she feels heroic, even if it's to a small portion, because as a transgender person, she must have felt like she's always lived in the small portion of society anyway. So yeah, I could see why, even though on a pure numbers standpoint, it's way the minority that minority has buoyed her.
Yeah. No, it's
You see, I didn't even think of buoyed and swimming and water. You see how I did that? I didn't even. That was an accident.
The last thing about it that I want to say, I am fascinated by this idea. If she doesn't make the Olympics, right, and she's done swimming, I'm curious what that looks like. And what I mean by that is, like, is she still a figure? Is she still somebody who is on the front lines of, you know, transgender equality? Or like, is her, because this I guess this is what I was trying to say, and I did a poor job of saying it. Her swimming, to me, almost doesn't have anything to do with transgender equality to her. Like, I really think for her, this is about her. Like, this is like, I don't even know.
I get what you're saying.
I don't feel like she's swimming for Penn. I don't feel like she's swimming for transgender athletes. Like, I feel like for her, like this, like she really thinks like, as I want to be happy and this makes me happy. And so I'm doing this. And that mind frame to me is fascinating to just be able to say nothing else. Like, this is about my life and this is doing, because we all like pretend like I'm doing this for me and like, look out world, like here I come, and like that. Like, to me, like in the most unorthodox way, Leah Thomas might be doing that more than anybody else I read about.
I'm with you.
And so it's just the whole thing's really, really fascinating.
That is a good point.
Anything else?
No, I don't think there is.
Because you did your list at the beginning of the show.
I did. I wrote it down. I crossed them all off as we go. I hope Edmonton stops a couple goals tonight. The Rangers with a nice win.
Let's end with this, because I'm a junkie. NBA Finals.
Oh, NBA Finals tonight. So who? I don't even know Boston is the higher seed, right?
Because Boston's the higher seed.
Because Golden State was just beat up all year. So they were like a 4 seed?
They were 4 seed, but also too, the West was top heavy.
The West was good, but Golden State are they healthier now than they've been all year?
Probably.
So they are getting good at the right time.
Yeah.
It's going to be it should be a lot of fun. Obviously Golden State shoots it, and Boston can really defend. Golden State defends statistically better than they're given credit for.
Their team defense has been top 10 in the league.
Yes.
As when they're healthy, their team defense for the last decade has been absurdly good.
So give me your call.
I think it's Warriors in 6. I'm half tempted to say Warriors in 5. 6 is obviously the safer choice. I am much higher on the Warriors than society is. I think they are a little bit deeper, a little bit better, a little bit healthier. And I made the joke with my cousin earlier, like, I'm either going to be completely right or completely wrong. But I'm seriously like Warriors in 5, 6. Like, I think they're the best team.
How good of a coach is Steve Kerr?
I don't think it's about how good of a coach is. I think you have somebody that they they trust him to the ends of the earth. It is for Draymond Green. Think about how calm and believable and honest you have to be for a Draymond Green to actually listen to what you say. Like, for him, like that, when you speak, it has reverence to Draymond Green. So he's a player's coach. He's been in these big spots. I think one of the most underrated things about Steve Kerr is, like, he understands that yelling at his players doesn't really always do what you think it does.
Doesn't always do?
No.
How about rarely does?
And so, like, I think Steve Kerr's been there and he gets it. And the fascinating thing to me is, like, I don't even know if coaching is what makes Steve Kerr Steve Kerr. I think, like, more just like the psychology of Steve Kerr is what makes him so good at what he does. Now, it helps when you have the greatest shooters of all time and you've got some of these guys, but, like, he manages people better than I think anyone would understand.
It's a fascinating.
Yeah. And now, the irony is, I don't know if you've watched the Celtics or not. Ime Udoka is the new head coach. He took over for Brad Stevens. Part of that switch was Brad Stevens was too kind. Like, he was too, like, he didn't want to get on the Celtics players. And some of the younger Celtics players have said in interviews, like, you know, Brad's just too nice. Like, he just doesn't want to push us or anything else. Udoka is the opposite. Like, Udoka and Kerr isn't going to scream at anybody on his team. Udoka is going to get on, like, every single one of those dudes. There will be 2 or 3 times this finals where there's going to be, like, a scene or a clip where Udoka is, like, letting Jason Tatum know, like, get your crap together. Like, so those two styles are very, very interesting.
It is fascinating when you're dealing with greatness in anything, whether it's in, but we're talking sports right now. When Mike was playing with the Yankees and Joe Torre was very calm, and all these coaching staffs have multiple guys,
sure.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be the head coach.
Yeah.
But they talked about one of the guys, Larry Boa, who's a Phillies player, Phillies manager for a while, and one of the things that Mike said is like, Boa, well, if you miss a sign, Boa will meet you at the top step of the dugout, and he doesn't care who you are, and he's asking you why you're not reading the sign.
Yeah.
And they're like that. Yes, it doesn't fit into every coach, but I'll bet you Kerr has a guy on his staff who has the bad cop who's like, hey.
Yeah. I think one of the most underrated things in professional sports when it comes to coaching is what stage is the team in? Because I think there are coaches that if your team is young and they're trying to figure out what to do, you can't be laid back. These are kids. Like, some of these guys on these NBA rosters are 19, 20 years old. Like, they need somebody who's walking in every day, and it's like, you can't be late. Like, you can't. But then there's other rosters, like Golden State's roster right now, like, they're kind of older. Like, these are guys who have done this for 10, 12 years. Like, you can't show up every day and be like, hey, you're 5 minutes late. Like, you gotta. So it's amazing how sometimes the success of these coaches, it's just like, is it the right time with the right group to respond to you?
Well, and are you good at doing that? Because some guys handle veterans way better than they handle kids, and vice versa. So yes.
Yeah. So this finals is I'm very excited for this finals. The juxtaposition of the two teams, Celtics are young. They finally broke through, and they have a new coach. And Golden State is like the old dogs that are finally back with the veteran coach, and they know they belong. And Boston's not quite sure if they belong. And then Boston got there on their defense. Golden State has a good defense, but they're really there because of their offensive, ingenuity and shooting. And the stylistic finals, we haven't had this in a very long time.
Well, but as you were just talking about, as we talk about greatness of people, go into this, like, look at the school system because we can all relate to that. How many teachers are really, really smart in their subject matter and can teach the AP classes and can teach the advanced classes, but can't teach the lower level classes there. And how many teachers, like, there is a greatness in being able to teach the below average students and get them to excel to whatever level they excel to. And it's not always.
Yeah. So you'll appreciate this. So there was just an article, there's two little side stories. There's just an article about the Boston Celtics and how they have practiced defense every time they've practiced, which in the NBA, like, you don't do.
Right.
Like, you don't practice your rotations on a random Thursday in April.
Right.
The Boston Celtics do. And there was different articles about Udoka, and Udoka's like, they have to be able to just numbingly do it. They shouldn't even have to, like, their legs should just move, and their brain should almost be catching up with their legs. And the irony to that and what you're saying is the guy that I coached with at Mansfield University was in the NBA for 20 years, and he coached with Rick Adelman. And Rick Adelman never practiced defense. And Rick Adelman's whole philosophy was if we score, we're going to get back on defense, and we've got a pretty good chance to stop somebody. It's really hard to stop people when you don't score because now you're playing transition defense. Now, here's the insane part. Both of them went to the NBA Finals.
Oh, I tell people all the time.
So who's to say? On one hand, so I'm listening to the Zip, and I'm like, maybe we should never practice defense. Like, we should just work on scoring, because if you never play transition defense, but then you look at what Boston's done this year, and they are defensively the best team in the league. I mean, it's scary what they can do with their rotation. And then I'm like, we should practice defense. So on a night-to-night basis, I changed my entire opinion on whether or not you should practice.
Well, and again, this in every aspect of life, whatever you do, whether business-wise or teaching-wise or whatever, if it works, it's great.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, But I tell people all the time, like, whatever we run, what we run can work and it can fail. Like there's no sports system. There's no football offense that doesn't work. There's no football defense that doesn't work. And there's none that work every time.
Sure.
It depends on your execution, and it depends on, and that's the way it is in life.
Right.
Like the path that you took in life, somebody else can take it and it won't work for them, but they did something that you're just like, I can't believe they did that, and it worked.
The naive thing that I've noticed, like in coaching and in business and like all these different people, is that it's not necessarily what they did. It's not whether they practiced defense or not. It was that they had a system, they had a philosophy, and then most importantly, the people that they were coaching or working with believed in that system and philosophy. And that's really what mattered. So it's not, do you practice defense or don't you practice defense? It's that if you're going to practice defense, you got to do it every day. And the people doing it have to believe in it. And if you don't practice defense, then you have to not practice defense every day. And the people doing it have to believe that we're going to score every time. And to me, that's the common thread. The common thread is a system and a philosophy that people
makes sense.
believe in. Because there's so many different ways to do things. So there you go. Anything else? That was my last chance.
I'm good.
Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news. Oh, by the way, we should have Jerry on at some point because we want to announce the AP News stuff. So that would be good.
Oh, yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, we should do that. All right. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Jeff. He is Mark. He is not Alana. Alana was on yesterday. We will see you guys tomorrow.